Yeah, well, we used to play there about half a dozen times a year.
Ready to go? Everybody ready? Good afternoon, everybody. We'll begin the work session for the Common Council for the City of Plattsburgh, New York. This is the time in the meeting where we spend a little bit of extra time answering any questions, going over any agenda items where you'd like a little bit of extended conversation, any information from the public or from the department heads present. So please, we'll entertain any discussion on motions or on resolutions.
You know, just for the heck of it, Paul, do you want to speak to C?
Yeah.
Please,
Yeah, that would be good. Thank you. Just elaborate and tell us how wonderful it all is, I guess.
It is. I mean, the project is looking at the corridor that was identified in the DRI to go from the city marina up through into downtown Durkee Street. That building in particular has been noted in several previous planning studies, the LWRP, which the local waterfront revitalization program, the downtown revitalization as a key building. It's on the historic register, and it's really has been identified as a gateway to travelers as they're coming through into Plattsburgh. The first thing that they see coming off the train, obviously the train station, and it does need some renovating, sort of ideas to sort of bring the building back to what it was. And the first step in that is the facade. So this grant program would allow, if successful, 75% grant, 25% match by the building owner. So very much like what we did for the co-op, or with the co-op. And it allows for the facade to be painted, roof to be fixed, so that the outside of the building really comes back to what it was as a first step towards invigorating that corridor.
Fabulous. Yeah. Yeah, I just couldn't tell what the actual work was
It'd
gonna
be
be.
windows, paint, roof, essentially
Yeah.
is
Just pretty much the facade.
yeah, the outside.
And the roof, that's good.
Yep.
I
Correct.
noticed
So
a
as
little
you're,
wear and
as
tear.
you're pulling up, you're seeing it would follow historic guidelines. So we're not gonna. We have to make sure that because it's on the historic register and it's a historic building, we would make sure that it fits the guidelines there as well.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Paul.
Nice sod out there.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that beautiful?
What a transformation.
Yeah.
Are there benches going in too?
Yeah, you could sit on the rocks.
First one?
And those rocks came from the NYSEG remediation site. Okay. So, yes, I know.
I think with all the rain, we should be okay.
There's a little glow in that.
Yeah, okay.
And has everybody taken notice of the flowers in the rotary down
Yes.
the town as
They're
well?
lovely.
They are lovely. Yeah.
I want those kind of flowers
I got-
everywhere,
I got-
on every median.
You got it, sister.
Maintenance free.
Right.
If there's not any more question, what's on the agenda? Have we had a chance yet to discuss the paving stones on the Riverwalk that City Clerk?
Oh, no, we haven't formally.
I didn't know if maybe we should put some
Sure.
time aside at some point, because she had, what, 3 recommendations? Pretty exhaustive, so,
Yeah.
just wondering.
She's on vacation, isn't she?
Yeah, she's gone.
I know, I was just down there the other day, and actually my parents, I was given a brick for my parents who are deceased, and, you know, they succumb to the elements. There are many of them where you can barely make out the,
Yeah.
so.
I would just comment, I'm gonna start the doors on Monday, if that's okay.
Oh, are you? Oh, terrific.
Yeah, now
You're
it's
gonna
not
start,
raining.
what are you gonna do?
Refinish the doors in City Hall.
In this
You
building.
are, you are awesome.
Which ones?
The front doors?
The sides and the front. And you're gonna get what you pay for, so.
What,
Okay.
how much water is contained within those doors right now? They're
It hasn't-
heavier
it
than
hasn't come through-
usual.
It hasn't come through the inside yet. but,
Okay.
All right,
It's gonna look really, really sharp.
Thank you, Dale.
okay.
Thank you.
Keep you out of trouble for a while.
Well, I'm gonna be doing it at night, so I can't guarantee after hours, Becky, what happens. Okay, but not to be in anybody's way, and I'll just do
Yeah.
it. Yep,
So the police know that you're gonna be doing this?
not yet. They do now. They are. And I'm starting with the worst over there. Yep.
If you need some assistance.
Well, you know,
Okay, yep.
and
Actually,
since, I don't know whether your efforts to rehabilitate the kiosk there on the corner of Bridge and Durkee Street fell within our live stream timeline, but what I want to say is publicly that this is the first time that you've done such a thing, and I really appreciate it. Yeah, you painted that, right?
painted, yes.
And you put the hanging
I
flower?
did.
Yeah.
In the past, people have knocked them down.
Well, yes,
Yeah.
they get batting practice on them, but otherwise they're
Yeah,
okay.
this has been a tough summer because who was just saying that there was a pot, where did you say it, from AES? That was tipped.
I noticed it, I think yesterday morning.
Yeah, pot tipped, and then we had the two main pots over here tipped, so,
But what's there looks good.
yeah.
Okay.
I had kind of just a little fun thing to report. I had the good fortune of being able to participate in the Governor's Adirondack Challenge, which happened this past Sunday. And it's something that I think we're invited to every year.
We are.
And,
I'm too old to.
No, you're not too old.
Okay.
And it was just an amazing opportunity. The governor invited pretty much every elected official throughout New York State to the Adirondacks. It happened in Indian Lake, so there was a lot that happened in Byron Park in Indian Lake, which is beautiful, and I'm sorry to say I've never been there before. But it was amazing to see all the folks from New York City and kind of Long Island and kind of the southern part of New York to come up into the Adirondack region and see all of the amazing resources that we have, everything from hiking and biking, motorcycling, there was stand-up paddleboarding and canoeing and kayaking, they had a climbing wall.
You're not too old, Rochelle.
Well, no, but okay. Well, but here's the thing. So we had representation from the city, which was great. We had representation from the county legislature. Billy Jones was there. Betty Little kind of presided over a lot of the events. But Sarah Rowden, who was former legislator, she was on that climbing wall. She was climbing up to the top, ringing the bell. And they also had kind of almost like a ninja warrior course, with like this inflatable course where people were inside these big inflatable balls running around.
Yeah, I've seen
So
that.
picture Sarah Rowden inside of one of those big balls, like a gerbil running around. It was it was a lot of fun. And then it concluded at Corn Mountain, where the governor and his wife were there, and there was a kind of a farm-to-table luncheon, which was fabulous. And the number of times that the city of Plattsburgh was referenced, especially, I was amazed. And everyone is looking at us. They're really excited and eager to see all the great things that are happening. So it was an amazing opportunity. I definitely encourage any of you to attend in the future. And I think it's actually, it may even be open to the public too. So there were families there enjoying it. And Plattsburgh and the Adirondack coast was referenced numerous times. So we're doing a great job.
So they were positive references.
They were all positive.
A lot of those. Okay, good.
No, it was great.
And do you remember the Cowsills?
The
The
who?
musical group, the Cowsills?
Oh, yeah.
Indian Lake.
Oh, really?
That's the Spokes.
my
So there,
goodness.
Good.
Can you hum a few bars though? I'm not sure. I don't remember.
All right.
If anybody would like to do their liaison reports at this time, they're certainly welcome. Please, Councilor Kelly.
I had the great pleasure of taking a tour of the records rooms around City Hall and across the way in the MLD building this afternoon with Sylvia and Chase. And I was really grateful to them for being taken to these places. Some of the things I saw weren't all that great, but we had some payroll records from 1919. If you're interested to see who worked for the city in 1919, you can. But Sylvia very much wants to pursue some sort of records management improvements, and she talked about those some, and she asked me, do any other counselors have an interest in this? And I said, well, if they don't, by the time they take your tour, they will. Right. So I would encourage all of you to get with Sylvia.
I agree. I actually
done that,
I haven't taken the physical tour, but I attended the session that was here, one of the 2 sessions on record keeping here last week, and as part of the presentation there were numerous photos, and it's pretty eye-opening to say the least.
Some challenging places for sure.
Well, to be able to preserve those documents and have them, readily available in an electronic format. I think was it 3 years ago? I remember being in DPW, and weren't you in the process 3 years ago of kind of getting everything, all the old plans and everything, kind of assessed digitally? Yeah. So it's is that all done, or still working on it? It's so much. It takes a long time.
One of the things Sylvia wants to do is pursue grant funding to modernize the record keeping digital tools, and then also to improve the physical record keeping space with metal shelves and good lighting and safe environment for people to actually go find records. And that just seems like a great thing to do. And she gave a very interesting example of a town in New York that wasn't really following the standards for record keeping, and they ended up paying $34 million in a lawsuit. Whereas if they had destroyed records in a timely fashion, there would have been no evidence of whatever it was that got them in trouble. So, I mean, that's something for us to keep in mind.
I think that should go on the record.
The county did that very thing, found a private company that would do a lot of their records, electronic conversions. Then the private company was able to make those available online, and then the county receives a certain percentage of the revenues generated from that, enough to allow them to digitize even more. So it actually can be done at a relatively low cost if we're clever about it.
And the state being very much into the shared services these days will actually provide more grant money if you pair with another organization in your community. So there's some real opportunities for us there.
Excellent. Councilor Ensign.
I actually have a report from Recreation on beach utilization up until July 17th, with comparisons to same point in 2016. To date, we've had 6,125 user days through the 17th, as opposed to 14,996 from the same point last year. So roughly it's about a 9,000 drop. In revenue to date, or up until the 17th, I should say, there's been $10,594.35 in revenue, as opposed to $20,256 for the same point last year. So about a 50% drop off. They've been open only 15 days this year and closed for 12 days.
Due to rain.
Due to wet
primarily,
weather and rain. Last year they were open 25 and closed 2 through the same point. Staffing costs are down significantly by about $10,000. Staffing was, at the beginning of the season, was somewhat heavier than it is now for required lifeguard training, etc. If the summer weather holds, as probably appears like it will be, perhaps you can have Mr. Messner do something about that. Then we should be able to save more on staffing than what we're losing in gate revenue. So that's from Steve Peters.
Thank you. Any other reports? I guess I could give my mayor's comments just a little bit early then, get those out of the way and we can jump into the agenda. As we get our usual spreadsheet up, first of all, I love seeing that nice soon-to-be park spot where Highway Oil was recently. It looks so nice down there. The downtown is looking really nice as well. Weather's starting to hold up a little bit better, so that's a nice turnaround. This is wedding season. One of the most enjoyable things I get to do is people come well, not quite spontaneously because they have to get a marriage license in advance and all that kind of stuff, but ask the mayor to marry them, and I've got to do that a few times this last week, and I really enjoy that. It's a lot of fun. The DRI is really progressing rapidly now. The Albany folks administering DRI are going to be up in our office tomorrow and working with Paul and Joel. Paul and Joel are working incredibly intensively on this and are going to show some really dramatic progress to the DRI group from Albany tomorrow. I'm really excited about that, and things are progressing very, very well. Of course, we know that there's certain deadlines in the timeline. Much of the DRI was hoped to be completed actually by next year, and we're already well through this year, so we've got challenges ahead of us, but we're really determined to stick to the really pronounced timelines we were given, and Paul and Joel have been producing some internal timelines to make sure we stay on track. So I think the public will very soon see some real progress in the DRI. That's very exciting. Thank you, Joe, for a great headline in the newspaper today. I think that apparently has gotten awful lot of attention. People are going out and reading this Financial Restructuring Board report that all the councils have been given, and I've been hearing from the public an awful lot on it. They tell me that they're glad that this Albany group that was commissioned by the previous mayor to perform this study beginning about this time last year and created the report just only a few weeks ago, that it's quite confirming for the various discussions we have a group has been having over the last 6 months or so. So to know that they're recommending we head off in certain directions that we've been also exploring gives us some consolation that these incredibly difficult choices we're making right now are quite shared by other experts as well. So I certainly appreciate all the things I said in the report. I don't think there's much I disagreed with in it, actually. Most of it was quite confirming, and there were some other additional ideas that we hadn't been pursuing, and that was very interesting as well. I want to give you an update on the spreadsheet that I'm sure you're getting very familiar with by this point.
Joel, could you hit the lights, please? Thank you.
I have to, this really started off as the spreadsheet that you all saw during the budget cycle way back in January from Councillor Kelly, but we've been adding more to it as more information becomes available. This is, I think, version 8 now. I want to draw to you a couple of changes that we've had to make because we've approved various things in the budget of late. For instance, we've set aside $250,000 towards increased medical costs this year. Our medical administrator believes that cost should actually be $600,000, but we believe we can trim that to $250,000 this year. As you know, we've already encumbered the award for the arbitration with the firefighters. So when that process is completely finished, we know we have set that money aside for it. the challenging part, and by the way, this is a version where I only put in for the year 2020, looking a few years ahead, half of what we think it'll cost us when the Cadillac tax is imposed. Many of you know the Cadillac tax is a tax that is imposed on very good health benefits packages. This tax is actually borne by the employers, not the employees. Our initial estimates was that tax could cost the city upwards of $1 million. I felt that since there is some talk of hopefully delaying that Cadillac tax, if the new repeal or modification of the ACA comes about in the Senate, they're expecting to repeal it for another 6 years. So given there's some uncertainty, I thought, just to be fair to some of the individuals that thought that this might be too conservative, I reduced that amount somewhat to half of what it would be if that were fully imposed, knowing that's a little bit of a flip of the coin whether it will come into effect in 2020. I don't think there's very many other changes. We've modified the debt service costs over the next few years after discussions with our bond advisor. We've come up with a strategy to lower the interest rate quite significantly by increasing or shortening the terms for the bond only by a couple of years, from a 12-year average maturity down to 10 years. But we can save about 30 or 40 basis points or 50 basis points on the interest rate. So we felt we could save almost $1 million in total debt service over the period if we did this. So we're recommending that we shorten the period somewhat. It increased the debt service amount a little bit in that first year, but actually ended up decreasing it in second, third, and fourth year a little bit. So that's a modification since you saw this last. As you know, there's two scenarios. The one scenario where we don't really manage to make the cuts that we're proposing or that you endorsed at your conference on June 1. And then another scenario below it, scenario 2, where we managed to make the cuts. I modified the cuts somewhat. I sticked within your goals of a tax increase of no more than 4.9% next year, and to start having the fund balance start coming back to positive. Right now it is negative. We'll end up right now, even if we make the cuts that we believe we may be able to make at this time, we'll still end up with a negative fund balance at the end of the year. So obviously we have some more fixing to do to figure out how to do that, because we're not allowed to end the year with a fund balance. We can borrow against funds within the year, but they have to be paid back by the end of the year. And so we're still working on that a little bit. And because this is now farther and farther and farther into the year before we can realize cuts this year on a permanent basis, I've lowered the projections for what I think we could do this year down to $150,000. As you may remember, when we were talking about doing permanent cuts a few months ago, we were hoping to save upwards of $400,000. But as you shorten the time horizon, we shorten the time we can realize those cuts. We seem to be on track for temporary reductions in 2017 of about $200,000. I just went over that with Richard just a couple of days ago. We are hoping to track even better. We are a little bit underspending by about 1%, and that's because of the good work for the department heads and really trying to delay expenditures as best they can. To be honest, a lot of the brunt of the reductions in expenses this year have come on the chin of the police force, because they had the unfortunate circumstance of having a number of retirees in a relatively short period of time. They're down from 53 uniformed officers right now to 45. We also expect another couple of officers to retire in the next little while. Now that's, in the long run, that's going to provide us with some permanent cuts we can start banking on next year. But we don't really save those cuts in this year, because often associated with them are sick leave buyouts that represent more than the potential savings in this year's salary alone. So that actually is a little bit of a liability for us in this first year, but will certainly help out next year. I do want to put 3 more individuals in the academy, knowing that even if we put 3 more individuals in the academy, there's a chance that by the time the academy is completed and they've received 1 year of training with officers before they're actually useful as officers themselves, we usually have a little bit of attrition or fallout. One of those 3 people may decide after all that this isn't the career they want to go into. So if we put 3 in, we're hoping to have 2 come out, and we're still discussing whether we can afford to put any more in. The chief knows this. It's not an issue at all on the the work they're having to do to deal with the opiate crisis. You read in the newspaper the heroin crisis going on, this keeping them extremely busy. But it's not only in the crisis of drugs alone and the families they affect and the children that they affect, but it's also in the increased crime associated with heroin addiction that they're also having to integrate. It's a terrible problem, and I'm very sensitive to that. We're trying to do the best we can, but we also have, well, the city in some sense doesn't have the money to meet all those needs. So really the police have been taking it much more disproportionately than the other departments at this time, because they've been in that circumstance of having this attrition at just the wrong time for our budget. So I apologize to you, Chief, and we'll continue to work on that. So we still have a little bit of work to do just to be solvent by the end of this year under the scenario you gave me in June 1. If we don't make these cuts necessary, that scenario 1 is going to obviously require a very large tax increase next year, and I don't think any of us find a 30% tax increase at all palatable. So we're doing the best we can. Even with this, even moving some of those permanent and reductions into future years, 2018 and 2019, you'll see the number that we'll need to cut now in 2018 is larger than the $1 million we've talked about up till now, and that is primarily because of the delays in finding the consolidations or reductions necessary this year. But we're going to continue to work on figuring out how to come up with that kind of a sum for next year, and perhaps even a little bit more. I'm very uncomfortable with the level of fund balance that this leaves us, obviously. We need to get into more sensible guidelines. You as a council have determined that a 5 to 10% ratio for a fund balance is your goal. I'm obviously recommending even a higher number in the order of 20 to 30% based on the recommendations of the Government Finance Officers Association, which produces the white papers and does the analyses for cities like us in this. So we have a little bit of work to do to return that fund balance to a healthful rate. Obviously, even within the cuts that we're proposing, we're still in dangerously low levels of fund balance for the next number of years. So,
Mayor, can I ask a question about
please,
the
yeah.
fund balance? With your, you're urging us to increase the fund balance policy from 5 to 10 to whether it's 20 to 30%. What, and I imagine you might come forward with a resolution to change that policy, is that correct? Okay. So to what extent would you see that binding us for the upcoming budget if we were to do that? Are you thinking that, you know, we want for the future 20 to 30%, but is that something that you would factor into your budget immediately to replenish?
I'm afraid not. I wish I could. I think we need to have the discipline of having some sort of pathway, but built into this is not that pathway. As you can see in that bottom line there, it goes nowhere near even the existing policy, much less the more prudent policy. Right. So it's very awkward. What I would like to do is, as we come up with, you know, any temporary savings, make sure we don't spend that, put it towards the fund balance. If we can be more aggressive in our permanent savings, let that start compounding towards the fund balance. If we have a revenue source or some sort of windfall, as you know, we've talked about the Aki landfill, and that may return to us an amount that can go to the fund balance. Maybe we can start moving it up by in that way, and show an incredible amount of fiscal discipline to make sure we never let it start going down the other way.
Okay, so I have a follow-up question to that, if I can.
Please.
We're talking about lots of cuts and looking for savings here and there. I'm kind of interested in a little bit of talk about revenue. Because, you know, here and there we've had conversations, for instance, about the dam, the silt removal and the possible revenue we could generate. That would be a one-time thing, but again, that would be something
help with the fund balance,
that would go toward this fund balance. So, I mean, do you have a punch list of these possibles that are sitting out there, and can you provide any report on their progress or the hopefulness? I know we don't bank on them for the budget, but even a sense of this is, and maybe other possibles that we're aware of.
Yep, certainly will. I'll mention a number of them, and I don't incorporate them into the budget because I want this to be a realistic document, not one that is based on what we hope could happen. Right. But every time something that we hope could happen does happen, it can only help but improve that fund balance picture. We mentioned the Aki landfill. There is an opportunity to perhaps work with the DEC in relocating some silt just adjacent to the Imperial Dam, up to some city property about a couple thousand feet north. They would actually, or west, they'd be actually pumping it in large pipes up there. We haven't talked about a figure, but given that we expect they'll save an awful lot of money by using that site versus another site, we would hope that would provide a sizable return to the city, something to be negotiated. And that's proceeding at the pace of the DEC, as I guess we all can understand. But we are very hopeful that that will work out as well. There's opportunities for instance, a marina expansion. We were talking about Wilcox Dock with Department Head Peters yesterday, and he believes he can generate somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000 or $40,000 of additional revenue there. That would be very nice if and when that comes to fruition. I think we'll be prepared pretty soon to share those recommendations with you. He sent something to the councilors very recently on what we think might be the best site for that.
And I did see the Financial Restructuring Board also praised the city marina, made recommendations on the possibility of expansion of that.
The
I can't
marina.
remember if they had
Did I hear
attached
you
any
right?
money to it.
It's 15 years, $2.8 million once phase 3 is finished.
And as you know, we're still in litigation with Plattsburgh Boat Basin. My hope is to figure out a way to have their marina and our marina be equally high quality, and for them to really embrace and endorse our expansion. And I think we can actually get to that point. We're able to do very little as long as we're litigating, and I'm hoping to move beyond that litigation very soon as well. About 65% of the property in this city pays for 100% of the property taxes. I'd like to look at other avenues to share some of that burden based on what sort of services some of the exempt properties receive. They certainly receive fire and police services. They receive water services. They have curbs and sidewalks. We're exploring legal opportunities to allow tax-based.
Didn't we talk about special assessment districts?
Yes,
We
we
did.
did.
Mike brought it up, and it was brought up within the context of the snow removal
Right,
project.
right, and that's so much tax exempt property.
Right.
I think we used the city of Ithaca kind of as the
Yeah.
comparison.
And our council is actually exploring the legalities of what we'd be able to do with that. We're also working with John Ruff, Department Head Ruff, on what the water fund might be able to do to support that as well.
And wasn't one of the issues that was a barrier, you guys help me remember, was that it would exceed the tax cap?
Right.
Yes.
Well,
At the time,
what this report says about that is that it may not be such the windfall that we think, because, let's see, 95%, I think, of the state property is SUNY Plattsburgh. And they say, based on the other communities that have tried this with state property,
The return isn't.
there's no return. They don't pay, basically. So they're exempt from paying in these special assessment districts. So it may not be such a
They're
windfall.
90% of the exemption
They are 95%
in the city.
Of the state property.
State
of the state property in the city.
Probably the
Yeah.
other part would be what
But there's
DOT.
also hospitals and churches and everything not in that category, right?
Every percentage helps.
So we'll explore that, and as a matter of fact, if any of you have any ideas of different ways we can look at that, we're certainly receptive. We're trying to look at different avenues. And Tim Ryan, the author of this report from Albany, has a fair amount of expertise because he sees what's done out in other communities, and I'm sure he's very, very interested in helping us with that as well. So we'll continue to work on revenue expansion. I think it's a very good point.
Mr. Mayor, I know I discussed this in the past too, in regard to potential revenue influx. Properties that the city owns that are underutilized at this point. And I know, Dean, you said that there had to be some action through the state in order for us to possibly sell those pieces.
No, not through the state, through our city code.
Okay.
There's a process that we can follow, certainly.
I would encourage exploration along those lines as well.
I want to thank you, Mayor, for the adjustment on the healthcare, given and I have other congratulations, the failure of the repeal in place right now, because that, you know, I don't think a lot of people understood the impact that could have on local
Right.
municipalities.
Yeah, it's profound.
Not just individuals, but municipalities and taxes that would require, so
Mhm.
let's hope common sense prevails.
Because the Cadillac tax has been postponed more than
It's,
once.
no, still in effect in 2020. If the revised ACA had gone through, they would have, one of the provisions in the Senate bill would delay it till 2026, but since that failed, still currently 2020. There's a lot of lobbying to try to get that extended, so hopefully, for our sake, it would be extended. Although many economists actually believe that the Cadillac tax makes sense from an economic perspective, because the people who receive the benefits from the Cadillac tax tend to be on the wealthier side of the income spectrum. They're in, the higher your tax rate is, essentially that higher that tax-free benefit from these very lucrative healthcare benefits occurs. As a matter of fact, it's the single biggest tax credit that most households realize. They don't realize they're getting it because they're never seeing themselves being taxed on that benefit being provided. So it's a controversial tax. We, as a municipality, hope that that tax is not imposed, because we pay a 40% employer tax on any excess of a certain threshold on the plans that we offer. I don't think I have much more to say on this unless you have any further questions. Again, this is a document we constantly revise. It helps us to try to understand the implications of decisions today in subsequent years. I do want to remind you that under the scenario where we aren't able to minister the cuts that we hope we do by the year 2023, in scenario one, we're hitting the constitutional tax cap, and by next year, we're hitting the what is recommended as the level you don't want to go over, the 15 mil rate, but by year 2023, we're hitting a rate where every time expenses go up by 3%, we have to have layoffs by 3%, because we're not allowed to spend any more, tax anymore at that point. The second scenario, again, is the one that has declining set, but still a very ambitious set of cuts each and every year, just to basically continue to hold us above water, even in an environment where we're talking about 4.9, 3.9% tax increases. So it's difficult. I don't think it's, I'm not pessimistic about it. I believe we can resize the government in a way that's more sustainable, and I think that there's every reason to do so, because this is an amazing community with all kinds of great potential. So to me, this is a very optimistic exercise. To me, if we can actually do this, we can really sow the seeds for a really prosperous future in Plattsburgh. On the other hand, if we fail to do it, I think we all understand the consequences, as Councillor Ensel has reminded us numerous times with his metaphor of moving vans, moving people, retirees out of town. I obviously don't want to see that happen. So, if there's no other questions, could we
I have
please?
a question. We had the fiscal profile of 2014, which only brought us up to 2012 because of obvious reasons. We had a fiscal score then of 9.6. 3 years later, we have a fiscal score of 41.3. Does that sound right?
It is primarily driven, and that's a case where a higher score is not good, kind of
Right.
like all.
Oh, yeah. So I'm getting to the environmental
Yeah.
score too. Okay.
Yeah. And that's primarily driven by our decline in the fund balance. We believe that based on 2016 data, we'll remain still somewhere around 41.3. That puts us in the category of being a financially stressed community, and it makes us available for these kinds of resources from the Financial Restructuring Board. We also have done the calculation that by next year, based on 2017 data and our fund balance, our score will be somewhere up to 47. At 47, we're pushed into the final category called fiscally distressed. Fiscally distressed, there's only 2 other cities in the state that are in that same category. So my work is to try to make sure we don't end up sharing the company of those 2 other cities. We're not very far from it. Our data looks like we're moving towards it, but I think that hopefully we can avoid that.
And the environmental score of 2012 was 16.7, and in 15 we're at 10.8. Is that an improvement because we've gone down? Or is
I hope
that,
so.
Okay. Well, I don't know how that score worked as well, because the higher you go in one, but the lower you go in the other is, okay.
And, you know, I believe, you know that most of the power we get, most all the power we get is from renewable, clean energy sources.
Right. However,
I believe that we should start thinking of ourselves as a environmentally friendly, green community. I'd love to see signs of people, when people come into the city saying they're now driving into, you know, a community that relies on sustainable energy for almost all of our power.
but financially, we're going to bear the brunt of others who are not of clean energy, correct? With the
Yeah.
closing of power plants, we're all,
We are right now because of the ZECs and the RECs.
yep.
Which I think is imposing
even
on
though
our
we're-
ratepayers about $1.4 million to basically subsidize nuclear power in
Right.
other areas in the state right now,
Exactly.
that's right.
So even though we're clean, it's still going to cost us.
We're clean, we're just paying for other people's
right.
dirtiness.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
Any other questions? If not, I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll begin by the pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Reed,
Present.
Councilor Armstrong,
Here?
Councilor Kelly,
Here.
Councilor Dowdle,
Here.
Councilor Ensel,
Here.
Councilor Casper,
Here.
Councilor Tretzer,
Here.
I think I've done my mayor's comments at this time, so we'll continue.
Resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Common Council held on July 13th, 2017 are approved and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councilor Ensel and second by Councilor Casper. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the payrolls of the various departments of the city of Plattsburgh for the week ending July 19th, 2017 in the amount of $506,351.28 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and the city clerk are hereby empowered and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Armstrong, second by Councilor Dowdle. Discussion?
Sure.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Resolved that the reports as listed are hereby ordered, received, and placed on file among the public records of the city clerk's office.
Moved by Councilor Kelly and second by Councilor Kretzer.
There you go.
Discussion?
You want some peels and stuff?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
There's 3
Passed.
Okay.
Resolved that the
correct.
bills ordered by the Common Council for the week ending July 21st, 2017 in the amount of $960,704.08 are authorized and allowed, and the mayor and city clerk are hereby authorized and directed to sign warrants drawn on the city chamberlain for the payment thereof.
Moved by Councilor Kelly and second by Councilor Ensel. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. This is the, opportunity in the agenda for any individuals who would like to come and address the council. Please come forward. At this time, we ask you to confine your comments to issues that we raise in the agenda. There will be another public comment in just a few moments at the end of the meeting on any issues of concern to you. So issues with regard to the agenda only.
Good afternoon. My name is Bob Smith, and I reside at 23 Concord Avenue. First of all, I want to acknowledge the things that we have accomplished in this city. The re-energizing of the Strand Theater comes to mind, as well as the Art Center and the cultural things that are happening. The many new restaurants that are downtown enjoying a rebirth, re-energizing of that whole area. The Saranac River Walk, which is not only something to be proud of, it is being used regularly. the downtown revitalization grant, $10 million, to help position us into the future, bringing new people living downtown, generating uses for dry cleaning, for shopping, for things of this nature. The Complete Streets program, so that we can now ride bicycles and walking paths that allow us to access Cumberland Head and other parts of the city, which will soon be able to link up with other developments. The town and the county has also achieved some very great things. There are expansion plans for the Saranac River walkway and trail to go westward, following the Saranac River. The airport expansion, on top of the airport relocation that we went through 10, 15 years ago. It's a huge, huge asset to this community, and one that not only we can be proud of, but one that's going to generate business. Millions of state and federal investments into infrastructure and business development have been poured into this area. Plattsburgh State University and the state have made investments in the infrastructure and in new buildings and have developed new programs. And of course, how can we forget the opening of the Advanced Manufacturing Center at Clinton Community College. These things are great. We have much to be proud of and to protect. What has caused this investment by the state and federal government? I would suggest that public support for causes such as the airport, the Strand Theater as it developed, the Saranac Riverwalk, and the wonderful geographic position we are in have been one of the sources of reasons why they had invested in this community. Our leadership was already pursuing shared relationships prior to the governor's request to work on shared services. CVPH and the University of Vermont Health Network have joined together to become more efficient, to deliver better service. The city and town for 3, 4, 5 years now have been working very hard together to improve the life of the citizens. The United Way of the Adirondack region encompasses the entire North Country, or much of it. When I chaired it back in 1980, it was the United Way of Clinton County. The Chamber of Commerce represents us to the entire North Country and to deliver our input to Albany, and it is heard, and heard loudly. The community has shown it can rise above adversity, as demonstrated by the successful redevelopment of the former Air Force Base. Who isn't proud of that? Our current adversity is the city's finances. We are hemorrhaging cash. There is no fund balance to absorb emergent expenses, let alone operating expenses. Some may argue the scope of the problem, but there is an agreement on the existence of it. As mentioned earlier in the meeting, this report goes along with what I have heard a few minutes ago. We are in trouble. In this report, there is also viable recommendations centering around the concept of shared services, not the elimination of services. Our challenge is we need to rise above resistance of change. We need to have the political courage to do what is necessary to save the city and its future from insolvency. We need to start us down the path to financial stability. But it is only a start, vital to becoming in control of our own destiny. We need to put aside personal and political positions and disagreements. As leaders of our city, I ask of you, we ask of you. You need the willpower to drive this issue rather than be driven by it. You need to pursue shared services. And you need to develop long-term solutions and not short-range ones. If we fail to start this process, we risk the following. Financial incentives that are available now from the state may not always be there. We may lose the potential of job relocation into the county or the town. The investments made by government as well as business will be placed in jeopardy. And most important, the gradual but steady erosion of our infrastructure. We need to come together and take these first steps. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
Are there any other individuals like to come and speak to anything on the agenda?
I just have one short thing to what Bob said. I think Bob said everything extremely well, and I support everything he said 100%. I think there's one point that he made that deserves emphasis, and that's if you want investment in your community, if you want investment to come in from the outside, you want companies to come in from outside, you want people to invest in your, as real estate investors, then they have to have confidence in the government is able to govern itself in a fiscally responsible way. If you don't do that, you're going to endanger the growth of this community. So I plead, really, my favorite slogan for what is proposed here is it's not a reduction, it's shared services, not a reduction of services. Nobody should want to pay more for the services that they're going to receive in any event. It just is not logical. Thank you.
Thank you. And do let me clarify, next week at this meeting I will be presenting my budget. I trust that the council will very soon take up the issue of consolidation and shared services that I've been discussing for a number of weeks now, and I've enumerated them before, but they include with the county assessment and potentially information technology. They include human resources, they include engineering, parks and recreation. I don't think any of that's new to you all. It won't be on the agenda tonight, but I hope it'll be on the agenda very soon for the councilors to consider. It's their council and their budget, but I will put a budget statement with all those out next week, so do pay attention to that as well. So please, at that time, also speak on these issues as they will be on the agenda at a future meeting. Are there any more comments on items actually on the agenda tonight? And there will be another public comment momentarily on other issues as well. Please come forward.
Hi, I'm Lise Davidson. I live on Monty Street. I would just like to say, as you're addressing the issue of the homecoming parade this year, as a parent, or excuse me, grandparent and guardian of a high school student, I would hope that you would take into account possibly maybe shutting down the street this year. Last year was my first year, and I had a 9th grader last year, and I was really concerned at the fact that the street was not shut down, and the number of cars that were not cognizant that there were high school students parading up the street, and they were driving through the parade. And it was really concerning to me because not all the students that are in that parade are on floats, and my child was one of them who was parading with the cheerleaders, and it takes 1 second for a student to step out of line or a car to, that's not paying attention and just swerve into. So I just hope that that gets taken into account this year for the safety of our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other individuals would like to address issues on the agenda tonight? Please.
Going to wait to the end. My name is Ira Barbell. I live at Culver Road on the old base. And I grew up here and moved back here and really happy to be in Plattsburgh. And I think the public has a lot of support for government in this city. And I have other things I wanted to, when I saw that report that came out, you posted on your website, I was very pleased to see that that was done, and there were several, I think, very interesting recommendations in there that I'm sure you will all pursue, besides the shared services. But there are a couple of things I wanted to just highlight, that came to me from that report. One, when I looked at the median household income in the city of Plattsburgh, it was in 2014, but I suspect it hasn't gone up a whole heck of a lot since then, is $34,460. Just keep that in mind. Half the people in this city make less than that, and half make more. And so when we're thinking about tax increases as part of our package in terms of reducing services and tax increases, we need to think about there are a lot of individuals in this city that are struggling as it is, and a tax increase makes it even more difficult. The employment rate, unemployment rate is 6.7%. I didn't realize it was that high in the city, and the child poverty is 23% of the children in the city of Plattsburgh are living below the poverty level. Now, when we think about tax rates, I think individuals tend to think of their own. I think it's $11 per thousand is the city's at currently, but when you're a taxpayer, you're looking at a $34 per thousand tax rate, because you've got the county's mill, you have the school district at $17 a thousand, and you combine these together, all of a sudden, it's not just the 4.9 that you're talking about, thinking about anyway, for next year. It's probably another 4.9 from the school. It's going to be another increase from the county government. So I would caution you to work even more diligently on what can you do to get the budget into a place where it's a balanced budget, and then look at what do you have to go to the taxpayers for. And a couple of things that struck me again from the report that I would hope you take a look at. One, I thought the multi-year budgeting process was a great first step. It really begins to show long-term the difficulty that you have in terms of revenue versus cost in the city. But I think there's another step that would be extremely helpful for the public, because a lot of this information doesn't get outside this room, or a lot of people don't look at your website, frankly, and look to learn this stuff. I'm a big fan of, when you get into this type of situation, take a look at developing a zero-based budget, where you can say, okay, here's how much money we have in 2017 or whatever it is, next year, 2018 budget, and what can we do with that money with no increase in taxes. So it forces then a situation, not across the board cuts or moving a police car from the sheriff's department or something. It really says, what are your core priorities for this city to function as a city? And that doesn't come out of the long-range strategy that you have out here. And I think it would then be an interesting document to share with the public. Is this where they see their city? As I said, I think you have tremendous support in this city for City of Plattsburgh government. But they don't really understand a lot of what's going on right now up here. Frankly, I don't, but I think something like that, a strategy like that, will provide not just a set of priorities, but that forces the council and the city to say, here are the priorities, top priorities, they have to be funded. And here's how, then you can figure out how you operate them. But it also then says to employees that are working out here, here's where you fit into this. Because I think you can't lose sight of, if there's some reductions that are going to take place, there's an impact on people. And so the council then has to look at, how do you handle that? How do you reach out to people that potentially could be impacted, and what can you do to assist those people in obtaining employment? And so there's an obligation that goes along with this as well on the part of the council for the employees within the city. So that to me, is an important piece that would help everybody understand more about where you stand on these issues and what you see as the important things that have to be done by the city, and then where are the gaps, where's the deficit? If you don't have any more, what doesn't get funded at that point? And so the public then can come forward and say, we want this funding. And they recognize that that's going to take a tax increase on them to kind of bring some additional revenue in to do this. So that was the first step. The second one that
I think you've actually run out of time, I'm sorry.
I'm out of time, all right.
At
But
the end.
thank you for your come back next week too, though. And it actually doesn't preclude you from also testifying later on in the evening. There will be another 5 minutes. Any other individuals like to come and address the council for issues related to the agenda items only at this time? If not, let's continue on with the meeting then.
Resolved in accordance with ordinance, therefore the common council approves Plattsburgh High School to have its annual homecoming parade on Saturday, September 16, 2017 at 12:30 p.m. The parade route would begin at Stafford Middle School on Broad Street, continue up Ruger Street, then down Adirondack Lane onto Clifford Drive, and finally down Angel Drive towards Cafeteria.
Moved by Councilor Kelly and second by Councilor Ensel. Discussion?
I would just like to ensure that the comments made earlier about having Ruger Street fully closed for
Yeah.
at least the 15 minutes are in
How is
place.
that handled in the past?
Brad Keeroy from the police department said that it only requires the streets to be closed down for about 15 minutes.
Right.
So they can use a shift that's on it already, so that's a thing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Chief Parkinson, would you mind just explaining how operationally that has worked in the past? And what can be done to prevent the residents' concern?
Certainly, basically it's just a roll car blocking the intersections where the parade is proceeding through, making sure there's no traffic in that area, the street, the block that's affected at the time. So it's a short time span.
Would that work in conjunction with university police or?
Yes, we often ask them for assistance for that.
Any further questions? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor Casper?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
Whereas the city of Plattsburgh is committed to securing funding to replace the water distribution system for Maryland Avenue.
I'd like to make a
Whereas
motion to
funds-
waive the reading and move the resolution.
Moved by Councilor Kretzer, second by Councilor Ensel. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, discussion? Roll call.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor Casper?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
Whereas the city of Plattsburgh is committed to securing funding to support the preservation of and business activities located in the Plattsburgh train station building.
I'd like to make a motion to waive the reading and move the resolution.
Moved by Councilor Kretzer, second by Councilor Dowdle. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed. Discussion?
Paul, I know that you have had multiple conversations with some faculty at Plattsburgh State. Specifically, I know one person in the OG about the is she going to be a part of any of that discussion? I know that she also addressed the strategic planning committee. I know she went to DRI. She's highly experienced. Is there any intention to use any of her expertise?
Yes, as the project expands, not in particular with this project as it's related to the facade,
Okay.
but I know she has been in touch with Amtrak to get some survey work
Yeah.
done, and so there's been some groundwork on utilizing the train station as a sort of, as a public transportation system.
Right.
This particular project, because it's related to facade
Just
work, is
facade.
kind of construction.
I just want to ensure, because I know that we have young faculty professionals here
For sure.
who really, and you know that better than I do, have come to your office with ideas, and I want to make sure that we don't drop them, that they are part, because that's what's going to keep them here too, as professionals.
Community development has actually worked with several professors and their students on
Yep.
internships and programs and projects and things, so very practical application for their students, but with the professors as well. So yes, as soon as we sort of move to the transportation portion of this and how it relates to transportation moving around the city and to the city,
Yeah,
yes.
good, thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Any further discussion? Roll call.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Enzel?
Yes.
Counselor Casper?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves the Plattsburgh Farmers and Crafters Market Group to block off an additional 40 parking spaces in the northeast corner of the Durkee Street parking lot for the 6th Annual Kids Day event on Saturday, August 5th, 2017, from 10 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Due to more participants than last year, the council approved blocking off approximately 40 spaces on June 29, 2017.
Moved by Counselor Casper, second by Counselor Kretzer. Discussion?
I just have a question, because I'm sure other counselors hear this as well, but I do get some residents complain to me about the lack of parking, and a total of 80 spaces is a significant chunk of space. I know when I get down Saturday at the farmers market on Saturdays, that the lot's pretty full. I'm just concerned about the ability to sustain closing off 80 parking spaces.
Do we have a parking study in the works, or?
Yes.
I can give you a progress report on that. We're just now choosing the successful candidate. 4 people respond to the RFP.
I think at that point, we can find out better. I mean, because we've had these discussions you weren't a part of in the past about what the parking availability is downtown and inner city, and what it needs to be, quite frankly. Whether we need a lot of quick access parking, or if we need to promote healthy communities by having, walkability and so forth. So I'm anxious to see the parking study, especially as it relates to recommendations with the DRI, putting in paid parking, whatever that is.
I have absolutely no issue with the event, or love the farmers market. As I said, I frequent it weekly, but I'm just concerned about 80 parking spaces.
Well, yeah, I mean, I understand what you mean. We have businesses downtown who pay, a parking assessment fee, and they depend on the availability of those parking spaces as well. So, I mean, I appreciate that consideration at that point. I think, that's 80 spaces altogether out of how many did you say?
360. You may offer a compromise.
I mean, I would, even if it was 60, just the additional 20 parking spots would be.
And there's also, access to the massive lot down by the marina that's about 2 blocks away from the Durkee Street parking lot.
That's right. You
So
mean in terms of the people who want to come to the kids, or anybody who wants to come anywhere? And yes,
it's like
I think that's a underused resource.
And it's two blocks away.
Right.
In essence.
Can I ask, how many parking spaces were affected by the demolition of the gas station?
I'd estimate 15 or 20.
Okay.
During the demolition.
Right.
Those
They
are
just
now
reopened.
free. Yeah.
Yes.
I know,
And
well,
there
people
was-
used to park at Highway Oil. They can no longer park at
That's
Highway
true.
Oil because of the.
That was
soft
about
lake.
10 spaces, I think.
Yeah.
I don't
Depends
know,
if they
maybe
were-
less.
Depends if they were legally parked. Okay. All right.
I mean,
I'm just bringing
Yeah,
up
I
for
think it's worthy
discussion
of
because I
discussion.
think, because I get a number of people
Yeah.
that say, people that live downtown say, I can't park.
right, I mean, if it's cordoned off, for the express use of those people going to the kids' day, that may not be really fair.
I think it'd be an interesting experiment to remove those 80 parking spaces and see how much of a parking problem it causes downtown. We don't really know. We always talk about it, but we don't know. But I also agree that it's a little risky to do it that way. And I agree with Peter. I think a compromise would be good.
Yeah, I think, Mayor. So, anybody have suggestions about how
I
to
would even
reach a
say, at
compromise?
least, if keep it at 40 or keep it at the original 40, or if they do need an increase, 50. I would be willing to accept
It's
50.
because of the number of vendors who have come forward and wanting to participate.
That's
why it's coming to what it is.
That's why, and I was going to mention, I wish there was a representative here tonight from the Plattsburgh Farmers and Crafters Market, because if they've already invested deposits on infrastructure for this event, and I know that I guess it would have been premature without having the space. But I guess I would just like to go on record and say that I have no problem giving the full 40 spots for this event.
You mean 80?
80.
Altogether.
Correct.
Considering 15 were occupied for some time.
Right.
Yeah, they might have bouncy houses or something.
I'd be fine.
Yes,
and honestly, this would be a good experiment, a good day to try that experiment.
So the spaces they're requesting, the 40 were for additional vendors?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you look at the map, that's a big chunk of land.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say I agree with Joshua. They've already set up the vendors for this.
But then why should they're not doing their due diligence? Why should they just because be approved because they didn't do things maybe in a proper order?
I think that we could put them on.
They took things for granted.
I think we could put them on notice maybe for next time, and with 2 blocks away having hundreds of other parking spots, I guess I don't see an issue with allowing them. And honestly, I guess we can see how it goes. It's not going to cause havoc, I don't think, in the city or downtown. And obviously, to have another event that's happening that's going to be bringing people to our downtown, I feel like there's a huge value to that.
Well, and yeah, on the other hand, I mean, think about the parking spaces that we use for the Irish Festival, and you know, I mean, there is something to be said about making that space a happening place. You know, I don't know.
Especially with all the redevelopment, where we want to encourage, critical mass there.
But at what expense?
I really don't see anybody offering up an amendment to the number, so do you have any further discussion?
I'll offer up an amendment to, I'll be willing to go 60 spaces. I'll meet halfway.
Is there a second? Second by Councilor Kelly. Any further discussion on that? Would you like to vote then on the amendment to a partition 60 rather than the requested 80?
Okay, can we have some further discussion? So then that would enable the Farmers Crafters Market to then utilize 20 more spaces for their vendors. All right, I was confused.
Yes.
Yeah, for the vendors.
And we would be voting now
On that as an
On
amendment.
60 rather than, on 20 rather than 40 extra
Right. The
spaces.
amendment is to reduce the number of parking spaces by 20,
From
which
40 to
potentially
20.
impacts whatever vendors or whatever activities they already have scheduled.
So then if this vote is defeated, then it goes back to the original.
Right.
Okay.
But the thing is, I mean, do we know whether they actually have those 40 extra spaces booked for other things?
I guess I'm assuming they wouldn't ask.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it seems like they put the cart before the horse.
Yeah, I
if
agree.
They did that.
Is there a representation?
I spoke to the president or co-chair. The reason we blocked it off that way was also a safety issue because they only block it off with sawhorses. So she was concerned that, having vendors and kids roaming around and all that kind of stuff. If you block if you're only telling them to do another 20 and, they put those sawhorses up, what if somebody backs into that and hits some, so they were trying to make it more, they're probably not going to use that full area. They just wanted to make sure
there was a buffer
for safety.
Yeah, and because they don't use concrete barriers, they use wood, just what DPW uses, those orange wood sawhorsey things.
I think there's also concern, even though it gets roped off, boarded off, whatever, there's still some persistent parkers that go in there in the evening, and those vehicles remain there throughout the day.
Sometimes they have to work
and
around
then
that.
sometimes it will show up and move them, other times not.
So let me be clear then. So if we do allot them only 20 of this 40 proposal, then there's still the chance that there would be encroachment by cars that would further reduce their ability.
Well, then have them ticketed.
Lowers that chance.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? Just
Well,
have them
yeah.
ticketed.
Yeah, but that doesn't address, a ticket is a punitive action for the people who violate the parking space. It in no way serves the positive benefit of having the space for the purpose of having the activity or the vending.
You get prepared for a vote?
Yeah.
So this is an amended motion to partition 60 rather than the traditional
Well, yeah.
40?
This resolution 20.
This resolution will be for 20 instead of the additional 40.
Because the other were already approved.
And if it's
Right.
defeated, we would revert to the original.
That's right.
resolution.
Right.
Roll call.
Counselor Armstrong?
On the amendment.
That's right.
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
No.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor Casper?
No.
Counselor Kretzer?
No.
That's a tie.
Tied. This is the first time I've ever had an opportunity to vote. Well, I'm going to vote yes for the compromise. Next item?
Resolved in accordance with the request, therefore the Common Council approves Roto-Rooter Plumbing and Drain Service to close Couch Street on Monday, July 24th, 2017 at 7 a.m. for 6 to 8 hours to replace a sewer lateral line that has collapsed under the road for 16 Couch Street.
Moved by Councilor Kretzer, second by Councilor Dowdle. Discussion, please. Roll call.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor Casper?
Yes.
Counselor Kretzer?
Yes.
I believe there's no resolutions for initial consideration. We've had many of the councilor reports. Is there any other new business or council reports before we have another opportunity for public comment?
Well, I'm just going to use this as a platform to say my piece about something. But, you know, I appreciate the commentary that we received in the first half of the public comment section. And I hope that over the next week, in preparation to receive the ideas that you've included in your mayor's budget, that, you know, ideas might be freely exchanged. I always enjoy coming in to see the mayor. Often there'll be other councilors there, and that kind of discussion is fruitful, informative, and collaborative. And so I know that there are many ideas that the mayor has alluded to generally, but the explorations are promising, and I hope that we can all work together to implement and further consider and improve upon any proposals that come forward. You know, I can remember the mayor saying that he hoped that we would be able to come up with some options, money-saving options, revenue producing options. And, you know, I think that we need to exercise extreme diligence in helping in this way. You know, there's no end to what we can do if we work together. So I'm looking forward to see a lot of activity around City Hall next week, and sharing ideas and exploring further.
Any other councilors? Councilor Kelly.
Just like to inform the council and the public that the next meeting of the Citizens Financial Advisory Committee will be Tuesday, July 25th at 5:30 p.m. Every person who lives, works, or does business in the city of Plattsburgh is invited to attend. We have right now about 11 members. If we had 22 members, that would be even better, or 33. So I strongly encourage you, if you are interested in talking about how we move our city in a positive direction fiscally, please attend these meetings. That's next Tuesday, July 25th, right here at 5:30 p.m. Please attend if you have an interest. We've had one meeting so far. It wasn't as well attended as I would have liked, but the ideas were stimulating and valuable, and we will have many more of those as we go along. It's always so nice to hear from taxpayers and to hear your thoughts on how we spend your money. So please participate. And I'm so glad so many of you came here tonight also. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other liaison or new business? Councilor Ensign.
I had a constituent come to me with some concerns. They were interested in possibly putting solar panels in their home. And I'm the first person within the city that they've contacted, but a number of the providers that they spoke to said that they were unable to put the panels on their house in the city. Once they told they lived in the city, that they were unable to put solar panels in their
There's
home.
nothing to prevent them putting the panels on their house. They don't, what doesn't happen is there's no, we don't pay them for their power. They gotta keep the power isolated to their house. There's no net metering. Net metering only occurs outside municipalities. In New York State, it's not inside municipals. So the person wants to put the, their house, they're fine. They're gonna have to put a disconnect in, and they're gonna have to ensure it doesn't backfeed into our system. Because it's a safety issue.
And the MLD director and I talked about that earlier today. It's an issue that cities cannot have net metering, but outside of cities you can have that very net metering that you anticipated. But they are free to provide, use solar power for their own internal use, but not part of the grid.
Thank you.
Hey, Bill, could you hook up a couple of houses? I mean, if one house, could there be a dispersion, like a, you know, coalition of houses on a street? Because, I mean, I don't even know how much power would be generated by one set of solar panels on a roof, but could people do that? I mean, it's because they can't sell back. They can't put it back into the city.
What do you mean, make their own mini grid?
Yeah, mini grid.
Theoretically, they could, but you gotta remember, you don't generate power at night, you don't generate power when it rains.
I know.
And if it snows, panels get filled with snow, they don't generate power.
Yeah, I know.
So you only get, in the North Country, you get it for about 45–50% of the time.
Yeah.
And it also depends how you position the panels. If you position them to the east, well, you'll get most of the sun in the morning, but you won't get very much power in the afternoon when it goes towards the west.
But I also know that Elon Musk is developing a better battery to store, because that's part of the problem, is you can, I mean, look at the weather we've had tons of energy, right? But you can't keep it, you can't store it in the batteries.
That's a problem.
But if you have a really good battery, that's the next leap. You got really good batteries, you store it up, and you got 2 months. Then you could have a mini grid.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
you want to
true.
talk about the city being forward-looking, you know?
Of course, putting a solar panel up, a 10 kilowatt system runs about $40,000. The batteries will probably double that easily.
Yeah.
So it's not a cheap proposition.
Okay. Thank you, Bill.
Any other new business or liaison reports at this time? Seeing none, this is an opportunity for the public to please come and address the council on any topic that interests you in the council. Please try and be also mindful. I start pointing to this device. It's our little 5-minute egg timer.
My name is Jeff Moore. I live in the city of Plattsburgh. Probably all know me by now. I just had a couple comments on, you know, the board moving forward on some of these ideas. You know, every week that passes, you're down another 35,000 bucks. I gleaned a couple of things out of the report that maybe other people didn't see, but the average full value property tax in New York State is $7.17. Here, this is an older number, so it's worse. But we're at the 75th percentile. We're 46% above the average community in New York State. The state of Illinois did a survey on places that raised their taxes, the municipal taxes. What they found was the more affluent people moved out, and the other people stayed in by quite a large margin. So speaking to what another speaker had said, that you want to have development here, well, don't drive it away. It's already more expensive than 75% of the places in New York State. The other problem that we have here is that the revenue expenditure imbalance. I think I've mentioned this before, but it's led to perpetual net deficits over the last 5 years, which I'm quoting from the report. It's exhausted the fund balance and is now turned negative. We need to get back to balance. I think it's a great idea, the plan to going forward, to try to ease into this, but we got to start even. We can't start in the minus column. It will not work. And that brings me to the other part of this, which you cannot use tax revenues to finance deficits like this. The problem being that only 50% of the amount of money that is raised by the city comes from taxes. So if you're 2% short on your budget, the property taxes have to go up 4%. We're in that problem right now. This cannot continue. If you end up, like on some of the 5% short, guess what? Your property taxes are going to go up 10%. So you cannot continue to finance this through just raising taxes. That will not work. And if you don't think that the city of Plattsburgh can go broke, the most affluent state in the union is Connecticut. Hartford is broke. The average income in Connecticut is $71,000 a year, per capita income, excuse me. They're broke. And it can happen there, it can happen here. It's happening all over the country. We do not want to be the poster child for where everything is headed. We just cannot continue down this road. And I know everybody seems to want to do something, but we need to do something. Every day that goes past, we're deeper in the hole. And it is not pretty. If we continued on the worst case scenario here, we're going to reach the tax cap, and somebody else will tell us what goes on here. Somebody else will come here and tell us how many police department people we have in the police department, how many people we have in public works. And that is not pretty, but that's where we're headed. So we have to take steps now to fix it. It only gets worse. The worst thing that could happen is 5 years from now or something, you got to go tell these retirees or something that we don't have the money for your health care anymore. Where does that end up? We can't afford to pay the people in the public works department or the MLD department. And that's where you end up. But we can take steps now to correct it, to make things work and be happy in the future. I know, I'm not going to quote you those figures, and I'm going to wrap this up, but this is not a community where people can afford to have a lot of tax increases, nor do they want them, nor should they. Who would want to develop in a place where the taxes are oppressive? We're already 40%, 46% above, and this is an old number. I'm guessing we're closer to 50, 60% ahead of all the other municipalities in the state. We have to change our thinking. We have to make Plattsburgh a place for people to want to be, not a place where people dread to be.
Thank you.
Would any other individuals please like to come and speak?
I guess I'm just going to kind of echo along with what some of these other people have said here. I work for a private nonprofit, and when there isn't money, you don't get raises, you don't get bonuses, and there is something that has been, this is the first time I've come to one of these meetings because normally I'm not available on a Thursday night to come to these, and I happen to be available tonight. But one thing that I have read in the news, and I don't remember which newspaper, if it was something from Channel 5 or that I read on Facebook, or if it was one of the other newspapers, and it was that the city, and I'm going to say managers, and I know that's not the right title, but the ones that run the city department, the program managers, were upset that they weren't going to possibly get, or that they were asked to not get their longevity bonuses. And that stuck with me, and it made me angry as a city resident, because we're all in this together. And if I'm expected to pay higher taxes, even though I'm not getting bonuses because my boss said, there's no money right this year, I'm sorry, but there's no money because we're not getting the money we should be getting from our to places that we should be getting, it's not there to give us, we're not getting to pay our programs, to pay our, budgets and whatever. So you're not gonna get your bonuses. And it's been years since we've had bonuses. It's been years since we've had raises. But yet I'm supposed to continue living on the same pay that I'm getting, to continue paying the increase in city taxes, the increase in school taxes, the increase in everything else that's happening. But yet, when we're asking our city leaders to not take a bonus, to maybe not take a pay raise for a couple years to help us get out of this, that hits me here. That makes me angry. And this is a town that I grew up in, a town that I left, or a city, not a town, but the city that I left for a few years for a job, and I decided I chose to come back to because I missed Plattsburgh. Wasn't happy where I was. I went across the lake. I went to Vermont, and I was like, I don't like it over here anymore. I want to go home. I chose to come home because I miss this. I miss this city. And now I'm like, sometimes there's a couple days. There's days that I'm like, I wish I never left Vermont. Sometimes I wish I'd stayed over there. And then I'm like, no, that's not true. That's not true. You're glad you're here in Plattsburgh. But there's days when I sit that back and I'm looking at it. I'm like, I'm going to go home. Today was payday. I have to go home and pay my bills when this is done. And I'm already knowing that I'm going to look at my checkbook and go, I'm not sure I'm going to pay all of these bills tonight. I really don't. Because I'm not getting I'm not getting my pay raises. I'm not getting whatever. But then I'm going to go home and I'm going to think, these people in city government are getting much more money than I am, and they're living better than I am. And yet they're mad because they might not get their pay raise, they may not get their bonus this year. I'm sorry. That really hurts. So.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Chris Gill. I just wanted to make a suggestion. Something that I've been doing is researching ways cities are saving money, because a lot of cities around the nation also face the same hardships we do. Like the woman just said, I returned as well. I went away, served in the Marine Corps, came home, and I said, this is a place I want my children to grow up. And now it's hard because I look around and I don't see what I once remembered. I see a lot of buildings run down. I see a lot of despair in the area. So it's hard to look at that and see, which direction are we headed. So, I think, like she said, we all have to do it together. One thing that I found really interesting is what was Toronto, which is not, the United States, but they have contracted out their trash removal. Is that something that we can explore to do, obviously contingent upon the employees that are now in waste removal would carry over to, like, say, Casella, if we contracted that out, because then we would be bringing in additional revenue while cutting costs. So that's something I would like to, maybe see if that's something that can be explored. And then beyond that, with the DRI, is the $10 million going to pay for phase 1 in hopes that we'll derive enough revenue to finish phase 2 and phase 3? And are $2 million of those dollars going to go to expanding the marina that is seasonally used for boat slips? Is that my understanding? No?
No, there won't be any partition to the marina this time.
Okay, all right, that's something, because I was like, man, that's, that's a risk, at that point. But is it possible to take some of this grant money and offer almost as rebates to the city businesses that do exist in the downtown? So
everything's been decided already. The state's already decided the exact projects that they're funding.
Okay, so that answers that question. But as far
there
as
are some improvement funds for downtown businesses, though, and we're working on a program for that.
Right. So I guess with the trash services, it's just an idea I wanted to offer up, and then also like sponsorships. Maybe we could offer sponsorships out to local businesses for parks and what have you. But I just wanted to give you that. And thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
I was watching the live stream and I felt compelled to come down after hearing a lot of stuff that's been going on. The first thing I wanted to talk about was, Mayor Reed, you mentioned that we were going to be entering into at a 47% into fiscal stress. That will be, it would actually be a level of susceptible to fiscal stress, which I understand is still an area we don't want to be in. But however, the way I see it is that's based on the projections from what they were talking about before. Now, this council's done an excellent job at closing the gap. So most likely, we're not gonna reach that 47%, and it'll be below the 45%, and we'll still be no designation. Still, there's a lot of work to be done. The thing is, you've recognized it already. There was a trend. A big increase, year, nothing much, big increase, year, nothing much. And now you're gonna put a stop to it. With what? It's a reality. This is New York State. It's unfortunate. There's taxes. There's taxes. I pay taxes in the city too. I'm gonna see increases in my taxes. Absolutely, it's gonna happen. You're not gaining the money. You don't have the revenue. The tax is gonna happen. And I'll tell you what, if you go and you progress into a fiscally distressed city and you get a financial oversight board from the New York State, what's gonna happen is they're gonna come in and they're gonna say, oh my God, you have this massive underutilized constitutional tax limit of 43%, which is in the lower half, actually, of all the municipalities in the state, the lower half, meaning we have more access to tax money than everyone else. Other cities can't tax any higher. Gloversville, Johnstown, they're at 98%. If they want to increase their tax rate, they got to go to the state legislature. We're at 43%. The state will laugh at us asking for a fiscal oversight board. They'll walk in, they'll say, hey, wow, look at all this untapped money. 30% increase. Be careful spending the money. It's inevitable. You have to understand that. If you bothered researching it and you bothered looking at it, you would find out it's inevitable. It's going to happen. And if you're going to save the quality of life of this city, you're going to have to face the fact that you're going to have to increase the taxes. 5 of you sat here and watched Jim Calman, the former mayor, plunge this city and did nothing. Nothing. 2014, he told you, you're not allowed to talk to the department managers. I saw the memo, I got it in the foil. You were all allowed to talk to them. The old charter, you guys ran the city. You ran it. And you sat down. Let Jim do what he wanted. Now, all of a sudden, hey, we're going to fix this. We're going to take care of it. Well, I hope so. You created it. And you know what? I've explained it to you the whole entire way through. 2013, you guys got elected. Hey guys, you're the most powerful people in the city. The most powerful people in the city. Take control. Told every single one of you. Well, except Mr. Ensign. You weren't here, like I said, with 5. Charter, new charter, changed it. The mayor's got control now. So guess what? When he makes decisions and he tells you how things are going to go, you kind of have to support him. You're going to have to realize that. And that's, I'm getting off on a tangent because there's one other thing I wanted to talk about. You're not using your executive sessions legally. I'm going to say this very simply. When you make a motion in any meeting, and you vote on it, there has to be minutes. In October, I watched the first live stream here, and in the work session, you guys went to executive session. I was like, wait a minute. They can't do that. It's a work session. They have to document this. And I asked people, do they always do this? They said, yes, all the time. How many executive sessions happen without the public even knowing? How is the public going to know? You made a motion. It requires minutes in a meeting. Requires it. It's going to be a separate meeting, separate minutes, required. New York State law. I've informed you. Well, I've informed corporate counsel and the mayor. They're looking into it. I'm giving them time, but I'm putting it out public because I don't mind saying it. It's the law. You make a motion, you vote. Doesn't matter if there's expenditures, a motion was made. The public needs to know how much you're using executive session. Because I'll tell you another thing, you're not using it properly. Some of the stuff isn't covered by executive session. You guys need to bone up, and Robert Freeman from the Committee on Open Government says he'd be more than happy to come up and educate you guys. So please consider it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joel.
Any other individuals like to come up and speak at this time? How are you?
It's good to see you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I wish I had an update that included more progress, but I guess I'll
Okay,
tell you
so
what's going on.
No,
Here to
please.
discuss 460 Margaret Street, Rob Ware, one of the partners. So we are currently working with a local firm, KAS, like Engineering Services or Environmental Services. After trying to deal with the state directly for our application to continue demolition, with asbestos in place, controlled demolition, we were informed that that 10-day notification period we had made reference to does apply, but that our application would require a variance, and we need a variance for two different reasons. I've mentioned this to Joe McMahon. I'm not sure if it's gotten spread around, but I figured, to the public I would tell them. So our project is within 25 feet of Icar the Adirondacks, and it's also within 25 feet of the sidewalk in State Route 9. So for that reason, we need a variance application. I can't write that myself. The project monitoring company that's actually going to work with us on the project has to write that. We can no longer use the company we intended to use, so we've moved on to a third company. We started with one that did the work last year with us. We went to a second one because the first guy was not available. They were a little over the top expensive, more than double.
So these are third-party monitoring companies?
I'm sorry?
Because you said the variance has to come from this monitoring company.
So the way it works with an asbestos abatement project of this magnitude is there's a project monitor / air quality control monitor, same person, on site at all times. Can't work without them there.
Right.
So they need to be on site. They're also the person that writes the variance application to the state.
Oh, okay.
So the catch has been, we had to find a new monitor because our original one was not available till September. We found a new one, started working with them. Unfortunately, the rates were double what we were paying before, which we thought were astronomical. We finally found a third person that we're working with that is actually doing the application for us, and they're available now and can start as soon as the state allows. So the other great things I think that will be helpful in giving this emergency status is the local Twin County Health Department has been alerted to some health concerns over mold and whatnot. I'm not quite sure the legitimacy of that, but it's actually raised some eyebrows at the state level, and I think that'll help. Because I guess to back up a little bit, what you learn in school isn't really, or in class isn't really the way it is in the real world. I learned when I took the asbestos abatement class that it was a 10-day notification period. When I mentioned that to the guys writing the variance, they kind of chuckled. They said, well, it's 10 days from when they accept our application. And this time of year, it's whenever they get to it. It's very busy. So they're putting in a rush on that. Hopefully we get good results, because if they do classify it as an emergency, there is no 10-day waiting period. You can start immediately upon the application being accepted.
So right now, you're monitoring, the monitoring company that you've contracted with can move fairly quickly with submitting that application for the variance?
Yes, and they're working on that as we speak. And that's a local firm that we're dealing with.
And that package for the variance included the letter that I wrote, or did that go to DOL?
Both.
Okay.
Your letter, they also have a letter from Twin County Health Department. They have the copy of the petition by the neighbors. I don't know how much that will help, because it's more a monetary concern, but yes, they have all that information.
So perhaps this emergency status would give a variance on the variance, or the 10-day waiting time, so.
We're hoping it eliminates the 10-day waiting period, so as soon as they say okay, we can start immediately.
And everything can start.
And we're available to start immediately.
I know. Really appreciate you coming and talking with us about it.
You're welcome.
Is there anything else the city can do to assist? Obviously, we have a large interest in having this project move at as fast a pace as possible.
I can ask that of the gentleman that's writing the variance. He's got Becky's letter. I don't know if that's enough. Maybe something from yourself or the city council would be stronger. I don't know, but he can answer that tomorrow. I'll put a plug in his ear and see what he thinks.
Thank you.
But anything else?
Can I just ask you,
Yes.
have you ever had so much trouble with the bureaucracy of the state in trying to do a development project?
No, because we usually start with a clean slate.
Yeah.
Any demolition I've done in the past has not been this magnitude or contained
I
asbestos.
just find it stunning that the state is just, you know, no.
Yeah.
When this is so important to the lifeblood of the city and quality of life and the health of the community.
True. Well, that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping the health concerns.
Should I go to Albany?
What's that?
Should I go to Albany?
Phone call wouldn't hurt.
All right, you give me the number and
Okay.
I'll be on the.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
Any other individuals like to address the council on any items of your concern? Seeing none, do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Councilor Kelly, second by Councilor Ensel. Roll call, please.
Counselor Armstrong?
Yes.
Counselor Kelly?
Yes.
Counselor Dowdle?
Yes.
Counselor Ensel?
Yes.
Counselor Casper? Yes. Counselor Spencer?
Yes.
Thank you, folks, for coming out tonight.
What?
You mentioned
I haven't kept track of that, I'm sorry to say. No. I wasn't doing that.
Oh, okay.
Where are you with it now, you know, all this budget stuff has kind of got my